all good entrepreneurs are consistently broke because there's never enough for them to do everything they want to do. We can preempt a certain organ losing function up to 10 years before you have these symptoms. And we've analyzed over 200,000 people so far. So we know that, yes, this is highly accurate.
What has been some of the most radical improvements?
Men who've lost testosterone, if you give them back testosterone, the theory of aging is that we have a program. And then if we reprogram that program, we might be able to double our lifespan. But one reason why that probably won't come out as we're expecting .
Welcome to the Lubo Smith podcast. Today, I'm happy to introduce you to Nikolina Lauc, the founder and CEO of GlycanAge, which is a biological age test that I tried myself. And I was not so positively surprised when I realized that my biological age, based on GlycanAge, is actually over 40. So I have something to focus on when I compare it to my cardiovascular results that I get, for example, from Oura Ring that claim that I'm 12 years younger. Anyway, the company that Nina has started is based on a long research that her father did. So it's amazing to see how the family heritage continues. And she has been explaining all the things that come into being able to do those tests and how do we actually work with the results. Nina, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you, Lubo. Lovely to be here.
I always like to start with mentioning that I have something in common with my guests. And today it's quite unique because what I found is that at one point you were also coping with dyslexia.
Oh yeah, no, my mother is also dyslexic, but she actually didn't recognize it in me, or she denied it for a period of time. And it comes with a lot of challenges, but also some opportunities. It's a different type of brain. So how did you find it? When did you discover you were dyslexic?
My story is a bit unique. I think I was diagnosed early in elementary school, and then they put me in like a special program for kids with dyslexia. And over the course of the next, I would say, 5, 6, 7 years, I felt like I entirely got rid of it. And to me, it was just, I feel like oftentimes when we encounter certain difficulties and issues, we seek explanations. And for me, dyslexia was probably just an explanation of something else that was happening in my life. And, there is a certain correlation between entrepreneurs and people that are overall quite successful having some sort of stuff like dyslexia or ADHD and stuff like that. And in my case, of course, I'm probably not the best writer, but at the same time, I don't feel that in my life anything would be slowing me down. I don't find a lot of difficulties anymore. But it's interesting that I have started with that, and I feel like it was probably either not diagnosed correctly or it just went away.
Oh, that's interesting. So I would also say that it doesn't hinder me in many ways. I think it takes me a lot longer to write an email or to write in general than anybody else I work with, or unless they're dyslexic, and we do have a couple of people who are. I think it's good to learn about it and to acknowledge it. I also have 4 younger brothers, but one of them is certainly dyslexic, and he's never admitted it. So he would just do these horrible crimes of spelling, and we wouldn't correct them for a long period of time. So at one point, for a number of years, he was signing himself Beast Philip instead of Best Philip. And we just let him do it. So I think my biggest challenge was generally language, actually. both in right, especially spelling, and especially English spelling. I could never get it right. But even in my native tongue, in Croatian, I am pretty rubbish at spelling and many things. But it doesn't affect my reading, or maybe it doesn't affect my reading because my mother made me read, or she would give me really interesting books since I was young. So I kind of got an appetite for it. And if I had the same appetite for writing, I would have probably become equally good at writing. I think it's just that you, in terms of language, you learn a little bit slower and it takes a lot longer because your brain works differently. And they have done these studies where they would look at the dyslexic brain compared to a normal brain while they read. And the dyslexic would read on the right side, meaning there's a lot of image, emotion, kind of creativity around it, while somebody without dyslexia would only have the left side, do majority of the work. So it's kind of like a more colorful, or I would say even 3D image-led brain compared to a completely linguistic brain that's quicker but lacks that kind of creative insight or that whole picture view.
Yeah, if there is anything that I feel is slowing me down, it's reading. But I frankly feel that it's because I'm lazy.
Just take you longer to get good at it. And the thing I trained was reading because I like to learn, and I like to learn by myself. I didn't like the way you're taught at school. But if I invested the same amount of time in writing, then that probably wouldn't be as a challenge that it is today.
I actually did something quite interesting. I think over invested into the ability to basically listen to anything at 2+ times the speed and being totally cool with it, right? So for me, it's like if I get a wall of text, and I used to hate these. When someone would send me a wall of text, I would take days to respond, and or I would not respond at all. And today I just, I play it 2.5x the speed. I'm done with within a minute or two, and then I'm happily responding back. But that is my way to cope with something that used to be very challenging for me. But I feel like I figured out a way out. I figured out a way out of it.
That's a good hack. I might try it. I also don't like
Well,
emails particularly. Yeah.
we are not here to talk about me and my difficulties today, but talk about your entrepreneurial journey and especially what you are tackling right now. But I would love if you could elaborate a little bit on what actually led you to explore the entrepreneurship path, because the business that you are driving right now is not your first business, and it seems like you found definitely your passion in building.
I think that was a childhood thing. It was, I always kind of had, I was a very entrepreneurial child and then teenager, and then uh, I had two businesses during university as well. So it was kind of something I always did or had like a natural drive for, but part of it was, of course, family influence. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in my family, starting from my grandfather, and each of them in their space. So they would specialize in a certain space, and then kind of my father started a private research institute. By the time I was starting my first company, that of course didn't work out because I was only 18. So it it's kind of I think there's a lot of things you have to learn in entrepreneurship. One of them is resourcefulness, so using whatever kind of materials you have. Um, Resilience, because everything takes time, and then an appetite for risk, because you're always on the, it can always, it's a make or break. It might work, it might not work. There's always a big dose of risk. And I think that sometimes people try, and then one of these things is too hard, and they give up and go back to a um, standard career. Well, if you've done something as a child, you kind of get so used to it that, I'm comfortable with any level of risk or however hard or long something takes. Um, and I use whatever resources I have. So you start where you are. You don't need to wait until you have everything to get going.
Yeah, I guess the first step is the most important, right? That sets you apart from all the people that are out there that have their ideas, their itches that they would like to go build something, but they never make the first step. And when you do that, you suddenly put yourself in a totally new category of the people that actually made a move.
Yeah, well, ideas are very cheap. Lots of people have the idea.
How would you describe your appetite to risk, and how do you have that balanced within your life?
I think in different stages it changes, of course, and I think it's probably different now to what it will be in 10 years time. But for the last 15 years, I was telling myself that whenever I go into a new venture or start a risk, the worst thing that can happen to me is I'll end up on my mother's couch. And that wouldn't be too bad, to be honest, you know? If I like my mom's place, she cooks good vegetarian food. It's a nice life. It wouldn't be too bad. But for the last 15 years, it's never happened. So I think it's kind of like imagining that worst case scenario, accepting it, being fine with it, and then risking everything. So with this last company, I was their first and only investor, and my choice was between buying a house in the UK, um, or putting it all into a new risky venture. And for me, this whole new risky venture was far more exciting than the house. I was like, what am I going to do with the house? It's kind of like I don't need it, and I don't have kids at this point. So I think that if I had kids, maybe I would have certain boundaries towards risk. So that will probably change in the future. So I think starting young or starting when you have less responsibility. So when you're taking a big risk, taking a big risk on you, not on your whole family. I think that becomes a little bit more stressful with time.
Yeah, I can totally relate. And when you actually figure out what the worst case scenario is, and you realize that the worst case scenario is actually not that bad, then you realize, okay, why not, right? Why not give it a shot? And as I mentioned, I can totally relate. As I have no big commitments, and like it's just like if I end up on a street, literally, I feel like I should not be that worried that I would not be able to get a job and make living. But I actually often realize that the things that make me the most excited, that bring me the most joy, they cost very, very little, barely anything. And like some of the examples are if I can go on like a beautiful bike ride with friends, like there's not many things that bring me so much joy like this. And I know that everyone has it different, but I think when you put that in a perspective, I think that's what helps me to undergo a big risk as well.
Oh no, absolutely. I've been on both sides of that, and I'm happy with very little. And I think that matters because people are worried about sacrificing their quality of life for what they already have. And because I'm happy with little, I'm happy to take that risk. All good entrepreneurs are consistently broke because there's never enough for them to do everything they want to do. There's always something bigger. And I think that instead of financial, that's my drive. There's always this kind of big new challenge, and it just kind of, if you do have a little bit of a reserve, it opens up opportunity to do something bigger. So for the first 3 years of this business, I didn't take a salary, and I financed it, and that was tough because I was going from tech to bio, and I had a lot of fear of failure actually, because I spent 10 years in tech and I knew exactly what I was doing. I could restart a new company and have very predictable outcomes, while in bio, it was a completely new space. So I think I made that risk more comfortable for myself by investing myself and my resources versus just going out to the market and raising outside capital. So they gave me a little bit of space to learn, but also to have something to show.
Maybe it's a good time to talk a little bit about GlycanAge, about what you are trying to achieve right now with your new venture, and then we can dive into the details, which I'm extremely excited about.
So we had there was an article after we did a fundraise last year, which called us the 20-year-old startup, because actually, although we're just under 5 years old commercially, scientifically we're more than 20 years old. Because this was something that was discovered by my father and started in his research institute. So our journey was a little bit different to the standard company where you find a problem on the market, you think of a solution, you implement it. It was more like, oh, there's this very interesting technology that we discovered. What do we do with it? Where do we apply it?
When it comes to the discovery of what is now possible to basically test out from a blood sample, um, it seems like it took about 15 years for your dad and the research institute to figure that out. Um, what was the discussion after that? How did you navigate it, you and your dad, as an interesting dynamic, right? To actually decide on, okay, this is how we will go with it, and we will start a company, and we will put consumer product to market so people can actually, and now I'm getting to what you actually do, right? People can track their biological age in a very simple, easy way, and then assess where they are on their journey when it comes to health. Did I get it right, at least a little bit?
You got it right. So we measure aging on a molecular level. And that's what I was 19 at the time, and I had my first business running, and he was pitching me this product, or he was saying, I can measure aging on molecular level, and this can be a product. But at that time, I really didn't care about age. If anything, I was telling everybody I was 25. So it took me a little while to build an interest. I think still I don't. I care about health. I don't care about aging per se. Um, and there was, so I'm going to, I'm 33 this year. So this is 14 years since he had the discovery. But that discovery came from him being obsessed with this part of biology that we haven't really had the capability to look at before. And that's called glycobiology. And I can go and explain, and I can try in a very simple way, but this is something that would change how your biology works beyond your genetics and beyond your epigenetics. So it kind of incorporates everything that makes you unique, from your blueprint to what's happened to your genes through life, which is your epigenetics, to everything that's happening in your environment for the last couple of months. So it can indicate that you're aging. And in this case, we focus on the immune system, so that your immune system is aging. But also, it can show that you're heading towards a problem way before you actually have the problem. So, majority of diagnosis today, or in healthcare, you get a label for a disease when it's very, very apparent. So, an organ doesn't function, and then this is labeled, you have symptoms, and you go on a drug for the rest of your life. But on this molecular level, we can preempt a certain organ losing function up to 10 years before you have these symptoms and before you actually have to compensate with the drug. So it's this early warning system telling us, hey, in 5, 10 years' time, you might have a problem, but now you have all this time to do something about it, and then delay and avoid that for as long as possible.
First of all, I want to say that it's very, very impressive. And I have so many questions right now because I have done the test myself a few weeks ago. I'm still waiting for the results, but one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is how precise that is, because what I have done is that I have basically pricked my finger I have provided 4 drops of my blood on the sheet of paper. And like, what is the precision of using this process that is extremely convenient? It took me literally less than 5 minutes to do the whole thing, and I know that for some people, pricking their finger is not something that they would like to do. So it might require a little bit of convincing. But I wanted to say that it's extremely, extremely simple. But what is the precision behind it? And do you ever get samples that are not testable, for example?
Very rarely. So if somebody doesn't read the instructions, and the drop is very, very small, or what else could they do? If they don't store the sample, like you don't put it in a bag, that little plastic bag to keep it dry, so something makes it. Um, but we would test it when the sample comes to see if the quality is good or if we have enough sample to do the analysis. What you do at home is very simple. What happens in the lab is very complicated, because the analysis itself takes us up to 10 days, depending on the process we're using. Now we're bringing it down to 7 and to 5 days. And it's more complicated than genetic analysis. And you don't have machines which are designed for glycan analysis. We have to customize machines and put their chemicals on top to look at glycans. Um, so that side's complex. On accuracy, it depends what you mean. If you remeasure yourself in the half life is 3 weeks, so let's say 6 weeks to see a significant change, unless you've gone on some radical therapy, like a blood exchange, you wouldn't see. You would see less than a year change because the error margin is less than a year on repeat measurement. And the reason you have 4 circles there, because in 3 of them, when we run the analysis, we run 3 analyses at the same time to look at the variability, to eliminate noise. And if we see noise, then we analyze the 4th one as well to make sure that there's no noise there. So it's very precise in terms of repeat measurement. Now, if you're talking about how close will it be to my age, it can vary a lot because it's your immune system. It's not something you physically see. It's not how you look. It's based on chronic inflammation, and it's this really low grade level of inflammation that you don't really see. So you don't feel inflamed. It's not like the acute inflammation of after you train and your muscles hurt. It's something that you don't see and feel until 10 years later. You have an issue. So it can vary a lot from your age. Actually, this variation from age, the average is 9 years. So if you're 9 years younger, then your average good. And if you're 9 years older, then your average bad. And the average of the average is their age. Now, what does that mean for a health outcome to be younger or older? Most of our studies, and we've analyzed over 200,000 people so far, predominantly research settings. So all of this was with grants looking at the aging process or different diseases, different interventions. So we showed on a cohort level, so in these thousands of people, it's predictive of certain diseases and predictive of mortality. Previously, we didn't show that on an individual level, it would be predictive of mortality and disease. And that's something we recently did, and that's coming out in a study next month, where we had 600 twins that were studied over 30 years, and they stored their blood samples. And then we analyzed those, and we see that if somebody has acceleration of their GlycanAge on an individual level, this is highly predictive of future mortality and future disease. So we know that, yes, this is highly accurate, both if you're just measuring for stability and if you're trying to predict long-term health outcome.
So, what are all the things that I can expect once I actually get my results back in a couple of weeks' time?
Every result comes with a consult. So I think we have these advanced reports. You should be given access as long as there's an expert on our team interpreting that. So you have an age, you have the different glycans, which are either pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory. So we give you a proportion of all of these structures. So how balanced is your immune system on these 2 functions? And we give association with 14 different conditions where we overlap your profile with the disease profile to indicate potential future risk factors for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmunity, and smoking damage, and so forth, or COPD, which is a consequence of smoking damage. So that's what comes in the report. Then we show you all the interventions we've studied, so different studies on exercise, diet, sleep, some drug interventions as well. So you can see what's out there that we already know will influence your results positively or negatively. And that's then combined with the consultation, which helps you put that in a perspective as an individual. So they talk about your family history, what you're doing at the moment, and they help you identify at least one or two things that you can change today that would improve your results in the future.
So you are taking this holistic approach, basically, of making the test very accessible, providing a result that someone can compare, but then going with these extra additions to it, as like the correlation with certain diseases, and also like the consultation how to potentially mitigate that with lifestyle changes, as well as other drugs, etc.
Yeah, you can think of it. So, right now, when we measure inflammation, it's mainly acute inflammation or inflammation as a consequence of disease. So, when you have a problem, inflammation will go up. Um, in this new or different level of measuring inflammation, it's such low grade that we're looking at where would this inflammation go in 10 years' time or in the future. Will it turn into hypertension or diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis? It's helping you identify what are your future risk factors connected to if you have accelerated.
Are there recommendations that you provide better with doing multiple tests over time, or they don't really connect with each other?
Biggest value is doing multiple tests because the aging theory behind inflammation, or what our test measures, is that this is damage to your immune system throughout life that will eventually accumulate and create this burden of inflammation that's not going away and then lead to disease and death. So, in different time points in your life, you're going to be doing damage or not be doing damage. So, the more you measure, the more you know. And generally, if nothing's happening in your life or nothing's changing with your lifestyle, once a year is enough. Well, if you're an entrepreneur and every year is different and it's lots of ups and downs, then maybe every 3 months, every 6 months, you will get a little bit more insight. And also, if you start an intervention, lifestyle or therapy, it usually takes a few months for that to have an effect. So, you testing a second time is to see if what you've done is actually benefiting you or not. And in general, nobody responds the same to the same diet, to the same exercise program. So all we can do is give you the best guidance we have from what we published, but there's no guarantee that you will respond favorably. So you really want to validate that after a few months and see if what you're doing is working, and if not, adjust course.
I feel like I should definitely be the one signing up for the quarterly subscription. Uh, but I know that we can't really talk in detail about patients' data, but I'm pretty sure you can cherry pick some of the data that are meant to be shared with the public. What has been some of the most radical improvements that you have noticed from doing so many tests, how people were able to turn it around? So we get an inspiration for someone who goes and realizes that they don't score that highly, but there is actually a way how to, as I said, turn it around.
It really depends on the person. And it's not patient data is private, and our users own their data. We publish trials, so we have lots of trials on different. So, for example, estrogen would have a really high impact on your GlycanAge, but this is women who've lost estrogen because of menopause, and you're giving them back estrogen. It can also be men, so men who've lost testosterone. If you give them back testosterone, we see positive effect, but not because of the testosterone. So testosterone level doesn't matter. It's the estrogen level, because in men, testosterone converts to estrogen, And there's a healthy range. Shouldn't be too low, shouldn't be too high. And that seems to keep their immune system anti-inflammatory and is very important for long-term health outcomes. And there's even data now that men who go on raw estrogen, uh, uh, people who transition, who go through gender affirming therapy to
Yeah.
transition into women, trans female, they look more anti-inflammatory and they have less coronary plaque, so less cardiovascular disease. But you can get this for testosterone. You don't need to go on raw estrogen. And this is only a factor if it's low for you, which it wouldn't be for a young man unless there's a problem. And in that case, you first want to remove the problem and then wait until you are in your later years and replace it when you actually need it. So that's one related to therapy. Now, on another side, if you're looking at an individual, you have to figure out what is his problem. Because it doesn't matter what we say as general advice, it has to apply to you. And we see that the biggest drivers, for example, athletes are generally more pro-inflamed. So before we started, you told me you do a lot of sports on a competitive level.
We're slowly getting there.
Yeah. So we did a number of studies on sports, and one larger review, larger study where we compared different types of sports and different profiles of training, from moderate to just beginning to exercise or go to the gym, between 40s and 60s, to professional athletes. And when we compare professional athletes and people who are sedentary and they've never trained in their life and they're a little bit overweight, professional athletes are equally inflamed as the sedentary overweight people, which is also a risk factor. This is why professional athletes have very short careers, because they do damage to their bodies very early on. Now, moderate training looks the youngest. So people who moderately train throughout their life, they have the lowest inflammatory scores. And then if you compare professional athletes, male and female, women look the worst. And they also would frequently lose their cycles. Depending on the sport, they can lose bone density. And there's a number of factors there that would mimic aging in a young woman because of the load of sports or physical stress she's putting on her body. So when you're an athlete, you're not really working for longevity, you're working for performance. And performance and longevity are actually two opposite things, because for performance, you need the same as entrepreneurship. You need to sacrifice yourself for a couple of years for an impact, and then you will fix the damage later on. And that's what you need to do with sports as well. So with athletes, we would see how inflamed they are when they compete. But what we really want to measure is how well do they recover after competing. And if you follow we did bodybuilding as a sport that you follow before competing and after, also marathon runners, they would start with a relatively good baseline, so not so inflamed, or closer to their age. As they compete, they would accelerate. It can be a decade. They can go quite high, and then 3 months later, they recover. Sometimes they go back to their baseline. Sometimes their baseline is a little bit more pro-inflammatory than what they started at. So it depends where you are in your competing recovery training journey. That needs to be interpreted for an individual. And then the main thing you would want to care about as an athlete or somebody who does sports is how well you recover after competing. So a couple of months after high school.
So is it common, because like I of course use all the tracking devices you can see, just 3 on my hands, so I get a lot of data, and that gives me a little bit of insight into my health. uh, so I feel like, from, for example, cardiovascular standpoint, I think that I should be quite covered. But it's only one little segment of health, right? And it has nothing to do with inflammation. It has nothing to do with the metabolism as well, and many other aspects of health. And I feel like having an inside look into what actually is going on in my body is very, very important. Do athletes ever go below the baseline that you would see that they are actually their biological age is way lower than what is their chronological age?
Oh, of course they do, but they're usually an anomaly, not the average. So when we find an athlete who's very, very anti-inflammatory, we want to explore what he's doing. So like, what do you do? Because if you're looking at like a professional soccer player, rugby player,
Yeah.
they are usually highly inflamed.
So the damage has been done pretty much because they just have to
Um,
train so much, I guess.
well, you are at recovery period; they still recover. So when it's off season, and then if we look at retired athletes, they usually do still have a higher inflammatory load on average, but some of them don't. So I think it's all this new science we're learning with sports on recovery and how important recovery is because you are doing damage. And if you want to have a long-term career as an athlete, you want to train past your 40s, then you need to look after your body a lot more. So yes, you can have a great score as an athlete, and if you do, you need to tell us what you're doing, and then you can.
You must, yeah. If you have a great score, you must be doing something right for sure. Have you done any comparison? Because I know that there are plenty products in the market that claim to tell you your biological age. Have you actually done any comparison with any of those or any ones that you have experience with personally?
Yes, we have. So you have well many different ways of measuring aging. So you can do it through proteomics, epigenetics, glycomics. We do the glycomics side, and it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges. They shouldn't be compared. So usually and when we correlate them in studies, they don't compare, especially epigenetics and glycomics. They can be on a completely different scale. You can have a younger epigenetic age and a higher inflammage or GlycanAge. If we compare to outcomes, so how well do we predict future hospitalization? Glycomics was the best performer. So what we measure was the best at predicting hospitalization in 10 years' time. Also, when we compare the specific mortality predictor, so this is GlycanAge, it's not commercially available because nobody wants to buy their own mortality predictor. But when we compare that to glycomics, we were equally good at predicting all-cause mortality in the future. So the lesson here is that aging is a very complex system, and there are many these are still theories of aging. So with epigenetic, the theory of aging is that we have a program. And then if we reprogram that program, we might be able to double our lifespan. That's the whole idea behind the reprogramming therapies, which would be great. But one reason why that probably won't come out as we're expecting is that it's just one of the problems. Like if you eliminated inflammation, you had the best um, glycan clock you have, doesn't mean that there's not other factors there which are going to make you age. You'll just be at less risk of disease and mortality because your inflammation is that of a young person. Um, so there is one interesting study done by Steve Horvath, which is a German scientist who invented the epigenetic clocks, where he was comparing a bunch of different epigenetic clocks. And with epigenetics, it's kind of looking at past environment with a bunch of different information and then modeling a clock on mortality, on disease prediction, on age prediction. And by age, I mean your chronological age, which is what most of these clocks are. So they're very good at predicting your passport age, which doesn't mean that they'll be good at predicting a health outcome. And then he had another clock that was invented, which predicts maximum lifespan, both in humans, but also in all the animal models. And then he was comparing these clocks. So how does the clock that predicts disease and that predicts mortality, how does that compare to the clock that predicts maximum lifespan? And none of these clocks compared. So what that means is that we probably do have a program which gives us our maximum lifespan as a human species, same as it does in every animal model. But what kills us along the way is different to this program that gives us a maximum lifespan. Um, and
So
what
it's like a game.
well,
It,
I don't play enough games to use the analogy, but yeah.
to me, it feels like it. It's like you have to navigate your way through it, but there are certain conditions and criterias, and you can't really put them out of balance that much, because as you move one thing, the other one changes as well. And as you mentioned, just the connection between testosterone and estrogen, and how it pertains to being healthy. To me, it feels like a game.
I guess you can look at it in that way. And I think how I would interpret it is aging is multifactorial. We can fix one thing, but there'll be another 5, 10, or 100 other things that we have to fix if we want double lifespan. Well, if you want to live to, let's say, now we assume that the human maximum lifespan is 120, or let's say a couple decades above 100, then removing these mortality risk factors, where inflammation is a key part of it, that will bring you closer and closer to that we know now is achievable. So depends on how far you want to go. Maybe there's some therapies you want to, maybe I would wait to try some therapies, and maybe some things you can do very easily and see the impact.
Would you mind sharing what you have learned about your body, and what were some of the changes that you introduced into your lifestyle based on that?
Sure. So there's actually a paper we're publishing now on stress, and this is stress with medical residents, so their first year of being a doctor, or first year in practice, and they looked absolutely horrible in terms of inflammation, GlycanAge, because there's no sleep, there's very poor nutrition, and their lives are at risk, and it's the first time they're doing their job. So if you ask me where the highest correlation with inflammation, I would say hormones as a natural aging, because it declines with time, and then stress as a second one. And my personal story is very connected to stress. Or if I go down on what's the biggest thing I can impact for me, and that would drive my clock up and down, it would be pure psychology. And of course, it's probably different for different people. Um, and there's other factors that I would take care of, but they're well looked after. Like I started measuring a bunch of different things quite young. And I learned that both I'm genetically predisposed to be more athletic, but I would also have the hormone profile for an athlete. I would have a bit high testosterone for a woman. And if you look at athletes as a cohort, female athletes, they all have a little bit higher testosterone than the average. Not all of them, but majority, or far more in the average population. So average population is maybe 10-20%, and athletes it's 40 and above. And I'm a very good metabolizer of iron. So although I don't eat a lot of meat, I usually have high levels of iron, which helps you with endurance. So I can build muscle easily, and I can go through quite good endurance. I wouldn't train for a year and I'll go swimming and swim for 4 hours. So it's kind of like I guess, advantage. But the problem with that advantage is that it comes with risk factors as you get older. One of these risk factors is diabetes. And that's because high testosterone can turn into PCOS, which is also a fertility potential if it would become PCOS, which it hasn't for me yet. That could be a fertility problem, which then would be a metabolic or diabetes problem, none of which are an issue because I train enough to feed my body what it wants, to be partially athletic. And these are things I can easily manage. The thing which is hard to manage is stress. And my first small acceleration was in my 20s. So I measured this for 8 years now. And that was related to entrepreneurship stress. And then I did meditation course that changed my stress response. And then the last few accelerations, and I'm measuring one at the moment, were related again to psychological stress, but more related to childhood trauma. That would be triggered by different things, and then would kind of cause this background level of anxiety. And then until I process it, then it goes back down. So, yeah, very individual to me. But we do see that trauma, for example, PTSD, can highly accelerate our clock by 15 years on average. So somebody diagnosed with PTSD has 15 years higher clock, but it can also be stress from other factors.
Do you have any recommendation for entrepreneurs how they can cope with the amount of stress that they are experiencing to remain healthy?
Well, for me, this particular meditation I did, and which I'm doing again now, but it's a 10-day course, so it's a silent retreat, so it's quite a commitment. Not everybody can commit to it. Um, that permanently changed my stress response, and you always have two choices: either you eliminate the stress, or you get better at stress. So I think if you just want to get better at stress because the business is hard, it's a new challenge for you, then maybe you can try Vipassana. The meditation I do is Vipassana. It works for me. Now, if your stress is coming from something else, and a lot of very driven and high achievers, they have some underlying unhealthy drive, which comes from their childhood, which kind of makes them very willing to sacrifice themselves and do some extreme effort to achieve something, which is generally to prove something to themselves, something that they might have been missing when they were a child. And I think these things get triggered with entrepreneurship because it's going to push all of your mental and physical boundaries. And as these things come out, I think you need the tools to tackle them. And for that, of course, psychotherapy helps, but everybody's unique. So you need to find your thing. But I would be, as an entrepreneur, I'll be very aware there are probably drivers there that might not be as healthy, might lead to achievement, but might actually compromise your health in the long run unless you manage it.
You are actually not the first one telling me about Vipassana, and I have heard about it from my friend and also a guest I had on the podcast, Robbie Band from Othership. They have like a great mindfulness space in New York and Toronto, and you go there, and it's like it totally changes you in 1 hour, in 1 hour and a half. You come out, and you are like a new person, totally zen. And yeah, I feel like as you are telling me about Vipassana again, I should probably look into it.
It's worth a try. It's tough. A lot of my friends don't last the 10 days, but I think it's worth it.
It's definitely not easy to leave the business for 10 days, right? And take a break. I think like for the entrepreneurial mind, sometimes it's quite difficult to switch off. But yeah, as you said, definitely worth it. What is your take on what others are doing in the longevity space? Is there someone who you monitor, who you feel is doing something interesting? Who are the people top of mind for you?
I very much like following the science. So, and also individuals who seem to have personally figured it out, but are also in the field. So, one scientist I really admire is Eric Verdin. He's the CEO of the Buck Institute. I
Mhm.
think him yeah, personally, he's also a really good longevity example. He publicly shared his GlycanAge and had one of the lowest stages. And then I was like, Eric, we don't ever see this age unless you're in testosterone. Can you tell me what drugs you're taking? And he was like, nope, none of these. So it's very much, I think, well, we still haven't figured out what makes Eric so young. But I think there's a number of factors there on also, I would say, kind of this fulfillment in life and this personal stability in life and also doing everything you love. He's a race car driver as well, alongside being a scientist. So I think these are people I would look at personally for advice, because it seems that they figured it out both on a personal level and they're doing something exciting on the scientific side. But I would most enjoy listening to these early scientific talks when they're just about to publish something, like when Steve Hort was comparing his maximum lifespan and the other predictors, because that gives me the most idea on things that we kind of haven't yet tried or that we should explore. Um, but I can't tell you there's any special drug or a special thing I'm doing apart from on my side focusing on psychology as a big factor that's usually underrated.
Are there any companies or products that you feel are changing the game when it comes to health and wellness?
I love Aura. I lost my ring in the river, but
Right here.
you have, and I need to order my one again. I think they're doing a great job with sleep and also with changing behavior. A lot of people reduce alcohol or even quit alcohol after using Aura, because it gives them this feedback that even a glass of wine has a big impact on a number of the metrics there, which I didn't see with other wearables. I used to wear Apple, I tried Whoop. I wouldn't see as much of an impact on very small behaviors and factors. So I love what they're doing. And then company wise, ooh, I can't. Well, a lot of them are related to, because I care about women's health. So a lot of them would be related to that. So I think if you're a woman, one I really like is Fertility in the UK, which does a really good kind of fertility monitoring. Where they don't just give you the labs, but they compare it to the average demographic. They really go into detail. So I love what they're doing, but that's specifically for women. Um, and I would need to think a little bit more about any other names I could give you.
You already dropped quite a few. And probably last thing from my side to wrap things up. Uh, what do you think will be the next revolution that we are aiming for when it comes to health?
Oh, next revolution when it comes to health. Well, I think having this information, and I think the more information you have, the better. But, and of course, I'm very biased in saying it, but having this perspective of future risk. So when we did a study of everything that's connected to your GlycanAge, or what's all the glycans that we measure within it, it was connected to over 72 different diseases, from autoimmunity to cancer, cardio, pretty much a whole cascade of problems you could have. So having one part of biology that gives us so much insight and so early before you have it, I think I think this will be the revolution in preventive personalized health. But on top of that, I think it's really good to know your genetic potential. It's really good to know your hormones. It's really good to know the things that make you unique. So me knowing that I have high iron and a bit high testosterone makes me want to train a little bit more, because I know that if I don't utilize that potential, I can turn into a problem. So I think everybody is a bit of a mystery, and you have to see what things are key for you. But the more information we have, the more proactive we can be. And then health is not we're not scared of getting a diagnosis. If there's something coming in the future, we're 10, 15, 20 years ahead of the game and can really control that and decide when we get ill versus wait for it to just hit us.
I love that. Nina, thank you so much. I wanted to say that now I can't wait to go and listen to the episode again. And we are not even finished yet, but you have mentioned so many interesting things that I want to like go and dive deep and do a little bit more research, because it was eye-opening for me with so many topics that we have managed to cover. And once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time.
And that's it for the chat with Nina. I hope you enjoyed the show and it was an insightful episode for you as well. Because what I'm taking away from that is that our cardiovascular health and the data that we get from those trackers are not giving us the complete picture of our state of health. And there is metabolism, there is lifestyle factors there's many other things, and only when we look into the blood, it paints a clearer picture. And I definitely have something that I'll be paying a closer attention to, and I would love to repeat that test myself in a few months, maybe half a year, to see how things are improving. Hopefully they'll be improving. Well, I hope that you enjoyed the show. As usual, please share any comments that you might have with us, and I'll be looking forward to catching you next time.